This girl was a beautiful human being and clearly got just a taste of being herself and people around her that were supportive and good. And then people with very real state power stole that from her. Hey everyone. So we're back, and that's really good. The problem is that some really awful stuff happened, and I think we've thought about this for probably like 3 weeks, trying to figure out how to talk about this, and I think the only way to do it is to go through it. I really wish I had more flowery words or the ability to talk about this in a way that like could put a really incredibly powerful spin on it, but to me, I'm still kind of reeling from this. There's still a lot of grief for me. So yeah,
I still have been on the outside of the situation for a while too. I've been largely kind of not on the internet lately, just personal stuff. So
exactly,
still kind of seeing things happen right now.
So, for those who don't know, if you haven't heard this name yet, I'd be surprised. At Cyber Angel Fairy, known as Eden Knight. Eden Knight was a 23-year-old Saudi Arabian trans woman who was really cool online. I had the privilege of interacting with her over Twitter a few times, flirting, and, nothing substantial, not like I knew her or anything, but, I remember really liking interacting with her before our old TGT account, the old Twitter account, got nuked. I didn't actually know that I knew her until later. So I was still impacted by this, but much more so as kind of things unfolded.
Yeah, I remember it kind of hitting you when you went, "Oh wait, that is that person."
Yeah, because she apparently had a different account when I interacted with her. It was a Solaris, I think it was. So.
Well, and suddenly things snapped in from like a general like, "Oh God, this is something happening in the community," to, "Oh shit, I also, had interacted with this person on, at least a personal level. Like if they're not, not a huge personal level, but at least a more personal one." And just, I remember that snapping in real quick, going, "Oh."
Yeah.
That was a lot of kind of the reaction at the time.
So for those who don't know, and I assume everyone does by now, but we probably should still cover it, Eden's story is pretty tragic. She was gorgeous. Absolute cutie. And those wings kick ass. Just fantastic. A young Saudi trans woman is believed dead after being lured from the US and forced to detransition. Eden Knight's friends describe her as smart, hilarious. She is believed dead at 23 after friends, and a note she left says a mysterious lawyer convinced her to return to her family in Saudi Arabia. On March 12th, Eden Knight, a 23-year-old trans woman, posted a note to social media detailing her intention to die by suicide after her parents repeatedly confiscated her hormone therapy treatment. Her note went on to describe a lack of family support, uncertain legal status, and third-party manipulation that ultimately forced her to detransition and leave the US for her family home in Saudi Arabia, a country known for its violently hostile towards LGBTQ people. I hope that the world gets better for us, Eden wrote. I hope our people get old. I hope we get to see our kids grow up to fight for us. I hope for trans rights worldwide. Not long after the note was published, posts from her family's account on Twitter and Telegram stated that she had died. Vice News spoke with 4 of her friends to learn of who Eden was and reviewed past messages between Eden and her friends to piece together what happened to her. Eden's story highlights the dire consequences associated with forcing a trans person to detransition, and the institutional failures that made it difficult for her to consistently access life-saving healthcare and a safe place to live. Her note, which is supported by the recollections of her friends as well as private messages she sent, also describes the involvement of private investigators who contracted for the US government in an effort to get her to return to her family. I want to be very clear, we'll talk more about this as it goes on. These people are guilty of human trafficking. There is no world in which you cannot convince me of this being the case. We have seen these reports and are studying these allegations, a spokesperson for the State Department said in a statement. We want our trans kids to grow up into trans adults. We want our trans people to be able to live fully. Trans activist and researcher Erin Reed, based, told Vice News, "If her life could have been anything, I hope it brings attention to what the consequences are of forcing somebody to detransition and what the consequences are of withholding somebody from being able to express themselves." You want to read these next paragraphs?
Yeah, I'm starting with the E.
Yep.
Eden was living in the US while in college and came out as trans during the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a public Word document summarizing Eden's story that was assembled by her friends. Multiple friends told Vice News that she was well-read, so fucking smart, and hilarious. They said she wanted to be a leader and an advocate for trans people, and to support trans people in Saudi Arabia specifically. She was also a big fan of rapper LiQWYD and would want that included, her friend Zoe said. As with a number of other sources in this piece, Vice News is not using her full name to protect her privacy. In the spring of 2022, after Eden had finished college and was seeking pathways to remain in the US, she ended up living in Columbus, Georgia, with a married couple, Bailey and Hayden, who were looking to host and support homeless trans people. The pair told Vice News they had become close with Eden. Bailey and Eden got their nails done together, while Hayden recalls being floored by how smart Eden was when they talked about economics. She was like an aunt to their child, Bailey told Vice News. She really cared for our son. She loved our son, and our son loved her, Bailey said. We at one point gifted her a bracelet that had the word aunt etched into it.
Aww.
Yeah. Shortly after moving in, Eden started her medical transition. She simultaneously started coming out of her shell and became such a bright beacon, but at the same time was overtaken by the shadow of it. Like, I'm in a lot of trouble. I'm scared, Bailey said. Victoria, a mutual friend of Bailey's and Eden's, went to her first Pride event with Eden in June 2022. Same week, Eden had started hormone replacement therapy. I remember seeing how happy and confident she was to start living as herself, Victoria told Vice News. In August, according to the note, Eden was contacted by a man offering to help her fix her fractured relationship with her parents. Hayden told Vice News that this was a phone call, which he overheard because Eden had put it on speaker. The man on the phone, he said, complimented half-naked photos of Eden he had found online. I remember that really struck me as odd, and that was my first red flag with the guy, Hayden said. He was such a fucking creep. Yeah.
True.
Hayden and Bailey said the man didn't bring them into the conversation with Eden, despite the fact that she was living with them. That man, according to both Eden's note and direct messages which she sent at the time and were reviewed by Vice News, was Michael Pacalico, CEO of Special Investigations, a Washington area government contractor specializing in investigations, intelligence, and cyber, as well as a novelist and former Republican official whose website describes him as a combat aviator, Navy commander, political candidate, venture capitalist, and global corporate chair.
So all the things we dislike.
Wow, that's a lot of credentials there. In a private message, Eden described him as famous. Neither Pacalico, fuck if I know, nor the chair of special investigations responded to request for comment. Pacalico, she wrote in her note, claimed he was a fixer who wanted to fix the issue that was between me and my parents. I thought this was impossible. I'm transgender, and they are strict conservative Muslims. But I decided I would give it a shot, because it can't hurt, right, Lamau? Hayden and Bailey said Eden spoke with Pacalico weekly. In her note, Eden wrote that these calls seemed innocuous and honestly pretty helpful. And she ultimately moved out of their Georgia house in October after Pacalico, according to her note to multiple friends, encouraged her to go to Washington, D.C. Victoria told Vice News that Eden, who was in the U.S. without authorization, said she hoped she'd obtain U.S. citizenship there. Eden wrote in her note that Pacalico and his associate Ellen Cole, who did not reply to a request for comment, along with a Saudi lawyer named Bader, met her at the train station and took her to a hotel. Then Bader became her sole point of contact. He pampered me, Eden wrote. Bader, according to the note, got Eden an apartment, bought her meals, and put her in touch with therapists, all while subtly trying to convince her to detransition. In a November 1st text exchange between Eden and Hayden reviewed by Vice News, Eden spoke of her apartment and sent Hayden a picture of her view. He tried to get me to be normal, gave me examples of feminine men, and said that they are transgender but they are hiding it, that it's better to hide it. Told me stories personally about people he knew that successfully hid it, she wrote. Over time, Eden wrote, she became entirely dependent on him. Running away wasn't an option. She was also worried, due to her legal status, that if she ran away, she'd ultimately be deported. Bailey, Hayden, and Victoria all say that their contact with Eden drastically decreased after she moved to Washington, and communication became more fragmented. But Victoria told Vice News she heard bits and pieces about how the person Eden was with forced her to dress masculine and pressured her to stop hormone therapy.
So I want to interrupt chat real quick because I'm noticing people are using this term. This is not grooming. I really know you guys want to use this term for everything. We're going to do a segment on this at some point. This is manipulative. It is absolutely gaslighting. It is absolutely the use of thought control and absolutely cult tactics. Grooming is a specific action done to minors to prime them for sexual relationships. Eden was an adult. So, again, Shark said it was grooming. Well, I don't care what Shark said. I am tired of people misusing phrases. I agree that what was done was abhorrent, but when we misuse these words, I genuinely get irritated because I find that what it does is it actually damages their use further in the future. This is exactly what Republicans are doing by calling helping kids transition grooming. They spread out the term and destroy the definition. Yeah, it's actually in some ways, like, I actually agree with Allison in chat, in YouTube chat. It is absolutely worse than grooming, because in some ways, despite her being an adult, this was like complete and utter isolation. This is the same thing cults do. This wasn't just the going after a vulnerable minor. This was going after a person who was vulnerable in an entirely different country, and then proceeded to separate her from all of her allies with the intent of trying to send her back to a foreign, hostile country. Yeah, this is trafficking. This is literally the way trafficking goes down. So again, I want to be clear. I am saying this is abhorrent. This is awful. But we want to be very careful in our use of language, because when actual grooming happens, it is absolutely repugnant. But what this is actually something much more sophisticated, because in some ways, grooming is an act between an adult and a child. The fact of the matter is this was a whole shit ton of people working together to completely destroy this girl's life. We cannot minimize it by just jumping to an easy term.
Well, that and confusing terms makes it even harder for anyone dealing with these issues to get language around it, to figure out what's going on, to actually be able to, like, have the right words to talk about what's happening to them. So
yeah, and again, like, I agree with you guys that this is abhorrent. I also want to be really clear that no, these people are murderers. To me, they are guilty of something in the ballpark of either homicide or manslaughter or something, because they literally led this girl to the circumstances to where she had no hope. No, it does have some conversion vibes with Ultra. I would actually say the definition given earlier for human trafficking, the sort of thought control plus human trafficking, it really does have that cult feel to it as well. I feel like those are much better things because you have multiple people working on this at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
I can start reading.
Okay.
Vice News reviewed Discord messages between Eden and her close friend, Zoe, in which Eden makes reference to her lawyer, Bader, who she described as representing herself as Harvard-educated, and his attempts to convince her to detransition. He knows I left my family to transition and told me to lie to them. Okay?
Yeah.
And say it was grade issues. Eden wrote at the time, he constantly says I look like a man and a teenager that's confused, which is fine because I have piercings and dyed hair, but I'm just having fun with those things. They don't make me a woman. Nobody misgenders me so purposefully like he does. Eden would later find out that Bader had been hired by her parents, she wrote. He tried to get me to be normal. In Eden's note, she detailed how she eventually stopped hormone replacement therapy, changed her clothes, and succumbed to the pressures to detransition. After a meeting with her parents, she wrote, Bader bought her a flight back to Saudi Arabia. Friends told Vice News she moved back sometime in mid-December. Hayden said he had received a text from Eden in early December asking him to pick her up before she replied saying, I don't need it anymore. Then radio silence, Hayden said. According to Eden's note and her friends, Eden tried to continue hormone replacement therapy in secret while in Saudi Arabia, but her parents found her hormones more than once. This is when, according to Eden's note, it all came out. Her parents admitted that Bader, Polico, and Cole were hired to get Eden back to Saudi Arabia. They also berated her and called her a freak. The day after Eden posted her note, her family's Twitter and Telegram channels posted that she had died. Eden's father did not respond to a request for comment, nor did the Saudi embassy to Washington. Politicians peddling anti-trans policies, we'll be talking about this later, often say that they're doing this to protect children, but trans people rarely regret transitioning. In fact, a new study found that only 0.3% of 1,989 participants voiced regret. When trans people do experience regret, it's most often caused by societal stigma and lack of family support. That's like 99% of all detransitioners. Forced detransition can make a trans person's mental health can put a trans person's mental health at grave risk, Reed said. This is as much a murder as a suicide, Zoe said. Gender dysphoria, social isolation, and the shame that can be so bad, and having her hormones constantly confiscated. The things that she was going through were so insane that it wasn't just a mental health issue. I don't think most people could survive that, trans or otherwise. Studies show that trans people are more likely to experience mental health struggles, including anxiety, depression, PTSD, and thoughts of suicide than cisgender people. But gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapy, can improve mental health outcomes for trans youth. Parents who affirm their trans kids also make a difference, studies show that kids whose parents support their social transition don't have higher rates of depression than their cis peers. This makes a good point here, by the way. This is something Zena and I have said multiple times.
This data has been around for a couple of decades at least. Actively, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is, these higher rates of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and thoughts of suicide, these are not inherent to being transgender. They are inherent to a society that is transphobic. These are the outcomes that happen when you are dealing with a society that is transphobic.
And just to be clear, even if you are a parent who is afraid of what might happen to your trans kid, that still isn't a good reason to ever limit your kids. Especially because, one, they need to do what's right for them, and two, you just being there, being supportive, and being with them actually makes a massive difference in whether or not they're going to, be okay and have better outcomes.
We'll talk about this in a segment, a future stream, but again, much like sexual orientation, gender identity is something that appears to be multifaceted. And what I mean by that is that conversion therapy's goal is to get you to change your verbal identity and change your behavior. What it can't change is the actual experience of your gender. But the problem is conservatives don't care about that. They don't care if you're inside suffering and wanting to die, because for them, either outcome of you living normally and being absolutely miserable or just ceasing to exist works for them. Yeah, her parents also took away her passport and any way for her to get a new one. Yeah, they trapped her in that country. And apparently her family, if I remember correctly, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently her family is close to the Saudi royals. So this was kind of like an oubliette. There was no way out. Gender-affirming care is safe and effective and endorsed by major national medical bodies in the U.S., including the American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. But despite widespread medical consensus, there are trans kids in the U.S. who are being forced to detransition, and GOP lawmakers are making things even worse with introducing more than 450 anti-trans bills in 2023's legislative session alone. The bills erode the ability for trans people to access gender-affirming care. So we're going to have that as a hopping off point for a future part of the discussion. But right now, I want to just kind of talk about Eden. So, what do we even say to this? This girl was a beautiful human being and clearly got just a taste of being herself and people around her that were supportive and good. And then people with very real state power stole that from her.
Well, I'm played on a person who, from everything that I could tell, probably, like, would like a chance for their parents to, like, be supportive if that was possible. Like, it sounds like they played absolutely on that.
To be very clear, Eden is the same age as my kid. Like, this is an unthinkable to me as a parent. Like, this is why I'm disrespectful to evangelical religion, because I don't think any faith, I don't care what philosophy or faith it is, if it comes to the conclusion that me and mine are going to burn in some sort of hell, or that we're somehow sinners or whatnot, can die in a fire. It actually is just, there's no reason a civilized society needs those beliefs. I don't think we should respect people that have them. I don't think the freedom of religion should include somehow an exemption for what are abhorrent belief practices. Call me kooky, but I just generally do not think, like, you have the right to practice how you want, but if your beliefs include that, you are worthy of no respect. None. And this is what evangelical thinking does, right? These parents basically were just transphobes who decided to force their views on her and basically use state power, their own and otherwise, to basically kill their kid. There's no other way to frame this, in my opinion, and I think Zizi's as well.
Oh no, absolutely.
We can ignore the theological arguments about a God who would create trans people just for them to suffer. We can go past that and go right to the idea that, no, regardless of your beliefs, it doesn't give you the right to believe these types of things. I'm sorry, it doesn't. And I'm going to be really, really clear. What was done to Eden was absolute monstrousness. Forcing someone to detransition is awful. It is incredibly damaging to a person's psyche. It is actually one of the reasons why actual detransitioners, not the grifters who hang around with the right, but actual detransitioners genuinely really struggle, because often they do it not because they're not trans, but because they can't afford it or there's not enough social support. It makes them miserable. I don't know really what else to say other than that this can't happen again. Like, we if there's some way to stop this from happening again, we should. Is there anything that we can do to bring consequences for the people involved to set this as a precedent? I mean, ideally, I think that the State Department should probably, or the Department of Justice should probably bring charges directly against them for human trafficking. No different than what they've been trying to nail Matt Gaetz on for bringing a minor across state lines. In the same way, this is just human trafficking. Yeah, they got her out of the country. She wasn't a citizen of the United States, but they literally trafficked her under the most basic definition of the word.
One of the really hard parts with this, and a lot of my shock factor isn't immediately present because this isn't the first time I've seen some of these situations. This is probably the worst one that I have heard of. But like, there are gay conversion camps still operating. There are parents that send their kids to these kinds of places still in the US. Okay? There's what's her name? I want to say the book is Saving Alex. A girl who was Mormon, and at least her parents were Mormon. I don't know exactly where her necessarily faith is at or anything, but they sent her to like this random family with no credentials or anything because the husband and wife basically promised they would save her, and it was basically just torture. It's like literally like putting rocks in a backpack and making the kids stand against a wall for hours. Like, so a lot of this stuff is really rough. This is not like massive scales. A lot of this stuff is like really kind of underground, lesser known stuff, but no, this stuff still happens. And certainly laws that prevent conversion therapy of any kind, or trafficking kids or adults across lines for conversion therapy could definitely help. I think making sure that any attention that gets brought to any of these kinds of places would also help.
So Wade Robot asked in chat, can you clarify the distinction between beliefs and practices? Freedom of religion protects the right to hold abhorrent beliefs, but not any evil behavior that spawns from them. And so the problem is well, beliefs and behavior are different. We've made that differentiation on stream before. My argument would be is that the holding of abhorrent beliefs, such as a group of people will be punished for just existing, should not be tolerated in a civilized society. You are welcome to believe in that, and you should be ridiculed.
Okay, so we have to look at a little bit more, because when we go, where do people's actions come from? Well, the things that influence what actions you actually take are your beliefs, right? Like, that's a good amount of the influence, right? So if you've got a belief that says that, no, this thing is utterly bad and awful, then yeah, people act from that. This is why when, even in like a school setting with teens, you will see a lot of like some of the kids that are like really strong in some of the evangelical religions, not go near the gay kids or not really talk to them or try to like convert them or tell them it's wrong kind of thing. Because they've been taught a belief that that's how it is. And so that belief is where they're acting from, right? And so that's kind of where we get into some of that.
Yeah. I also want to make really clear that there's a couple other segments we're going to do tonight, and these will probably come out in order, so just bear with me.
Yeah.
But one of them is going to be talking about the Michael Knowles stuff, so we'll be getting right back into this idea that this is what the outcomes are. Eden's story is unique because of the horrors and the amount of state power and the amount of power these fixers had to do this, but do not misunderstand this. This is the GOP's goal. So that's the first thing I want to note before we get to that segment. The second thing I want to note is just, this is also why we as trans people have to be very careful in our advocacy for changing the system. We're going to be talking about a definition of a particular diagnosis tonight, and how poor language of that could do very real systemic harm. And so I want to be clear that we have to talk about these things in very clear ways as far as how to deal with this, because while the system we have right now does not work, it's not good enough, it doesn't help people transition fast enough, it has very issues, but it does allow some people to transition, it does allow some people to be able to do this. We have to be careful with that.
And we also ask, too, that people be mindful of what situation they're speaking in. So I want to be clear, like, if somebody is brand new to stuff, or, you're talking amongst your friends and somebody doesn't use the exact right language for something, I'm not worried about that, okay? I'm really not. But if you are speaking in a way that is being publicized in some format, so like a Twitter, some kind of blogging platform, streaming, you're doing some kind of advocacy, and advocacy could be you advocating to any other people, frankly, even if that is a one-on-one or a one to a large group, right? No, get your definitions right. It is okay to repeatedly look up, words and definitions to make sure that we're still using accurate language. It's okay to do that. Like, that's a good thing. So
I want to say to the people that knew Eden, I am deeply sorry for your loss. I know that I'm struggling with this. I know ZZ struggled with it to the degree they could based on dealing with the internet and all that.
No, it still hits. Yeah. It's just not something that is easy to show on my face, but it still hits really hard, though.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that, like, I gotta be really, really clear, like, I can't imagine what her friends are going through. The people that lived with her, that called her aunt, like, that cuts deep. one of the things we talked about on the stream before is the idea of like rehabilitative justice, and it is times like this where that shit's really hard. I'll kind of leave us off on this post. So this is from Eli Ehrlich. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I know that this is a YouTuber, she, her, and we fortunately now have confirmation that Eden's passing and burial service by her family. I removed her dead name from the screenshots. Justice for Eden. Her name was Eden. I also think say her name would have been appropriate. But of course that started a fight the last time we brought that up. Go to the mercy of God Almighty, young, I'm going to say woman, Eden Knight. Prayers will be held for her, God willing, today, Monday, after our Arsh prayer. I'm not going to try to pronounce that because I will butcher it and it'll be very rude. And burial will be in the North Cemetery. Condolences to the, I assume this is referring to the people that do this particular prayer, and for the women in the mosque only. I believe they pray separately. That is my memory. It's been a while. What I said was this: monsters. I don't believe in rehabilitative or retributive justice, excuse me, but there are times I wish I did. If I did, I would want these people to burn. I want to clarify this. I'm not chiding anyone in this post. I am reminding myself to hold to my principles because during moments of pain, it is easy to waver and lash out. I will never meet these people, so my beliefs are irrelevant. Feel what you feel. I am not judging. There's a lot of people wanting these people harmed and gone, and fair. None of these people will probably be able to ever act on those things, but this is what happens when a community is deeply grieving. We have lost two, to my knowledge, wonderful trans women this year, and there's at least 4 or 5 other ones that I can think of off the top of my head that haven't even been big news. Please take care of each other. Please support each other. Please seek out community if you don't have it. If you are dealing with suicidal ideations, please seek help. All right?
It's okay to grieve in whatever way you need to. Sometimes just... my grief for these things isn't always loud or a grief feeling in the moment, but definitely, like, these are the kind of stories and people that I keep in mind when I do activism. I always have since I was a teen. I know it always reminds me of this is why I do what I do. Yeah, it's, I don't know, I've been fucking depressed lately and it's hard to get up and want, like, be here and be a person, but also, like, no, this is the reason that I do the work that I do, because I hate seeing this stuff. I hate seeing people have to suffer and hurt, and not just, and the individual suffer as well as everyone around her too. Like, that's the thing. And so that's how I tend to carry this stuff with me. It's just motivation to keep working and keep fighting.
Again, condolences to all of Eden's friends and real family, not those assholes. And rest in power. See you in the next one.